Hello and welcome to another edition of Close Mode, the Enterprise Sales Show. I'm Brian Dietmeyer, CEO of Close Strong, the home of precision guided selling. And today, I'm really lucky to be here with my pal and longtime workmate, I suppose I could call you, Tonya McKinney, who is the Senior Partner America Salesforce Practice at IBM. Tonya, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. We've been
You know,
talking about this for years, this topic today, yeah?
yes, we have. And I do have to say, you look marvelous having gone through chemo. You're rocking the chemo hair. I have to tell you, you look amazing, my friend.
I didn't have a choice. I thought about shaving my head in grad school, Brian, but I was really worried about my head shape, so I didn't have the bravery to do it. But now I don't have a choice. I was like, thank goodness I have an okay skull.
You are an amazing woman. Long before that, you're one of the most hardest working, smartest people I've met in my life, and now I find out you're a complete badass on top of it. So I guess I
Well,
should have
Brian,
known that in the past.
you don't know the wake you created, years ago when we did a little joint interview around women in negotiation,
Yes,
which
I
and
recall
then
that.
yeah, I went on to speak at Dreamforce and many places around women in negotiation. And then I still hand out your hard copy book. Anybody I mentor gets the book and we go through negotiation exercises. And Brian, I would estimate that you've probably been responsible for quite a few women's increasing their salary
Woohoo!
and probably are worth $1 million to a few people in terms of salary upside.
I'm I'm honored by that. So last week, you and I were chatting. I loved you. You said a couple of things to me that I'm going to repeat today that blew me away. We were talking about sales and marketing disconnect, right? This is a million-year-old subject, and you said, "How are we still having this conversation?" And so we decided that we would continue this today. So let me start with this first question. I was doing some research prepping for this, and companies, there's motivation to get this fixed, right? I think we all know it, but companies who report really strong alignment between sales and marketing have 36% renewal increase over the people who don't, 38% higher win rate, but 90% of sales and marketing organizations are reporting misalignment. So this is the $1 million question. Why? Why are we still having this conversation, Tonya?
You know what? I assumed this was done. My previous history as CMO and VP of marketing, I put in closed loop marketing systems and
Yeah.
tightly aligned with sales. And then I kind of motored over into digital strategy and customer experience and then innovation. So here I am back in a role in the Salesforce ecosystem and now looking again at sales and marketing systems. And I was amazed how this is not standard operating procedure
Right.
at Fortune 1000, 2000 companies. It was like we did it 20, 25 years ago. I mean, I know it can be done. So, since last week when we talked about this, I, I started to think about what I was seeing in companies that was, I mean, technologically, we've had the technology to do this for a while,
Yes.
right? I mean, I hooked up from marketing through sales, through contact center, all the way into ERP and was able to trace every dollar I spent back to revenue to the company.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about here, right?
Yes.
So, so we have even better technology. So what's going on? And I started thinking, I think that might be some of it,
Mm,
Brian, is that we've got so many more digital channels. We've layered on application after application, and it feels like we're doing a lot. But in fact, I feel like it's creating distance between sales and marketing
interesting.
because every
Yeah.
single one of those platforms I mean, now we're looking at these, we're just mincing up all these KPIs. But we're not having our eye on the revenue ball all the way through sales and marketing.
As kind of a follow up to that, I think I was telling you the story last week that when I was in graduate school, I hardly spoke. I went to a weekend MBA program, and I felt like I was surrounded by people smarter than me. And I was fortunate enough to take a marketing. Well, I thought I was fortunate enough to take a marketing class with Phil Kotler, who anybody who studies marketing is generally known as sort of the godfather of marketing. And he wasn't a great professor, by the way, and it was one of the very few classes where I actually said something. My classmates used to toss candy to me and go, "Speak, speak," like a dog, because I never said anything, which would surprise most people who know me.
I know. I
But
really have a hard time imagining this, Brian.
I did it. I did it, and even with candy, and maybe so. Here's the PTSD. I did in Kotler's class, and I made this argument that there should be a part of marketing that reports to sales. And he said to me, "What is your job?" And at the time, it was VP National Sales. And he said, "Of course you would say that." And it so irritated me because it was such a bias. And I think, Tanya, the question I have for you is that American Marketing Association Chief Marketing Officer Council put out a report that 90% of stuff produced by marketing for sales is not used. And my argument to you last week was marketing's job has been one to many and brand, and our job is granular and one to one. Is it unfair? Why isn't marketing putting out stuff that sales is using? Is it because sales is lazy or because it's not good stuff?
I don't disagree with you. We had a mirrored point of view on there because your professor was saying, of course, you would say that as the CSO, and yet in a lot of my marketing career, I often ran telesales, or I turned my telemarketing team into telesales because it
Okay.
just made more sense because we could market and sell at a price point. So I kind of ate into the sales line where you were going to maybe eat into the marketing line of bill, and I'm okay with that, right?
Yeah.
Because I do think that we get blind to the jobs each other's doing a bit, and so I do think that marketing has to spend some time in sales to really understand how their material gets used and applied and what it results in.
Yeah.
Kind of like one of the things I think would be very helpful is that at least, once a month, you take one of your leads and you follow it all the way through to the end. You pick one from last year or whatever, and follow it all the way through to the end. And conversely, I think it would be good for sales to see what it takes to generate a lead that ends up, sent over to them. But
Mhm.
I keep thinking I don't know who's driving this, Brian, but this lead conversion point is like the only point that sales and marketing interacts with. And it's like this no man's land. It's like, here you go. And it's like, oh, I'll take it. And then we go our separate ways, toss it over the fence.
Yep.
There has to, what marketing does has to be integrated into the sales processes, the systems, the people, the AI in particular, right?
Yeah.
So just, had this scenario where sales wanted product marketing to hand all of their content to them in pro so that it can be consumed by the AI they were deploying.
Yep.
Well, like now we're putting a manual process, doesn't that further separate sales and marketing? And doesn't that and then marketing updates the material and it gets converted now to pros and handed to sales and put into some AI? I mean, part of it is sales has to invite marketing in. That should be a collaborative activity to take that product and product launch material and make sure it's embedded throughout the sales systems, organizations, and people.
Yeah.
And I would
I love
say,
that. I'm sorry. Yeah. Keep going.
I would say mediocre content
Yeah.
integrated, really pushed out into the sales organization would get consumed more than brilliant content that isn't really integrated into the sales environment. I
Yeah.
think that's what's going on and why a lot of that materials not being used because it's not aligned all the way through the sales system.
It's yeah. What you made me think of is one of my favorite HBR article is called "Staple Yourself to an Order," and I often think of this when I'm going through customer service with organizations. That if the CEO were to staple herself to an order, like you're going to find out. There's no way to find out what your customer experience is like. And I've done this so much, and you just made me think about that. That sales and marketing should staple one another to the order I love that, and I'm going to move to a moment very quickly into what you've done to make it work in your roles, because I think we can whine about this all day long, but you've done some stuff, and I want to get to you doing some stuff, but I want your reaction to this. This is the second thing you said to me last week that I want to revisit. And you said you met a COO at a company you worked for at a cocktail party. You introduced yourself and said you were in marketing, and he said, "Great, another piece of overhead." And you what did you do with that? How you used
Oh, I
that
was
comment?
mad.
Yeah.
I wanted to make him eat his words,
Yes.
but I mean, but it was because I was so angry and I was like, I want to be like, I want you to regret ever saying that to me. I want
Yes.
to be the, and in some ways it's also like, I'll be the last person standing here because I want to make sure that I am relevant to this company's business. I
That's
talk a
well.
lot
Yeah.
Yeah. I talk about a lot about activity-based marketing versus outcome-based marketing. And that's probably why I got so embedded with sales. Someone told me one time, wait, it might have been Tom Martin. I'm trying to remember this. He said, you're like a marketer that was raised by sales wolves. But I did market for a sales, a sales methodology and training
Yeah.
organization. So I did get so I think that's my advantage. But so that's what really drove me down to be so relentlessly revenue focused. I wanted to be
Yes.
able to point to every dollar the company had that I was responsible for and lay claim to that. A lot like a sales mentality, right? And I do remember one of the first startups I was VP of marketing for. The chairman of the board that was operating as the CEO at the time came to me and said, so I perfected this at Siebel. I started at that startup. We got bought by Siebel, perfected it at Siebel, and then took it out to one of the first startups I was working for after that. And the CEO came and said, you're really responsible for our very successful round B's and C
Mm.
because we have such predictability. The company knows if they pour X into this, you've shown that we're going to get Y out the other side. So there's confidence in the money and they give us more money and we have to give up less to get it. So, I mean, honestly, that's my biggest success in marketing is to be so essential to the company's success. And especially now in these economic times, marketing has to be doing this,
Yeah.
Brian.
Yeah. Well, I'd love, the reason I bring up that quote, snarky as it is because of your reaction. And I love the fact you say, I'm going to be relevant. I'm going to prove, I'm going to tie it to revenue. Such a powerful reaction. And by the way, I also love Raised by Sales Wolves. I'm trying, I, for some reason, I was like
That
envisioning
needs
a
to be
book.
the book I write is Be a
Yes.
Marketer Raised by Sales Wolves.
No,
Yeah.
it's funny you say that's actually what I saw the book cover when you said that. So I think we should both pay attention to that,
Wait,
and you might want to
what
do
did
it.
you see in your head?
I saw wolves, and I saw that title. That was about it. So we'll
I,
design that
I,
together.
I saw a very elegant sheep with Prada running around with wolves. That was
All right, that's way better. That's way better. I had a howling wolf. I think you improved. You improved on it. So and we didn't dig through this last week. You mentioned something about integrated marketing, and I felt like, and I wrote it down, and I want to know because it was in our discussion about your reaction to that snarky comment, talk to me about that. What when you say that, what does it mean?
and I think that's one thing that's moved along a little bit better. But I was one of the first people that pitched on integrated marketing, and let me tell you the science behind that and what I found and eventually turned into integrated marketing was because we were doing closed loop, right? And you can measure everything all the way through. So we were coupling marketing programs, and I started to, because I had such good data, I started to see, wow, when I do like this event or this email with this webinar, it lifts my webinar by 30%. And
Mm-hmm.
then if I do that with an event, and we started like piecing these together, and we learned, well, they had to be thoughtful, really. Like,
Yeah.
it can't be just things you do simultaneously or in sequence. They had to be related and they had to be moving you down a buying cycle. But we did see really integrating the themes and content together and really moving people along. And I think a lot of that has been put into customer journeys. But Brian, I think a lot of that has become, it's linked marketing, but not really integrated marketing, because it's still sitting in marketing. We still don't take that all the way through to sales. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you have companies, I come across companies that are selling by challenger or outcome or solution, and marketing selling by product, or maybe marketing's made the leap to selling by business outcomes, and then your sales is still selling by product. Well, you're not really integrated there, right? Even if you just do the integrated marketing, it's got to get integrated all through sales. And one of the solution I was doing the other day, which was, it was on the marketing side, and they wanted to have an agentic AI that would help solution for the customer. And this is where you want your marketer raised by sales wolves. It's like, well, that has to be integrated into the CRM system, because as soon as my customer's on here engaging with the agent to put some ideas in to potentially get a solution out, then that has to be feeding into Salesforce or whatever CRM and that AI, so that my salesperson is now being informed and working alongside my customer. And so I think integrated marketing isn't enough anymore. It was pretty good for just the marketing function. But now with the channels and everybody's blurring into sales and marketing, it's going to have to go all the way through. And
Yeah.
and honestly, folks aren't thinking about that all the way through to sales.
So something, Tonya, that just came into my brain, and Marie, our producer, is behind the scenes doing all this. And Marie, we need to name this "A Marketer Raised by Sales Wolves." That's the name of this episode. So just a little
Okay.
admin function while you and I are here. So I have another question that just like popped into my head out of the blue. One of my favorite books. It's a very sad title. It's called "The End of Competitive Advantage," and it's written by a Columbia professor, Rita Hunter McGrath. And what she says in this book is that we used to have this sort of like structural advantage, and we'd do our annual plan, and we'd leverage the bejeebers out of that structural advantage for the year.
Yeah.
And now the point that she makes is that there are so very few structural, long-term, sustainable competitive advantage. And she said something to me, or not, not to me. I wish she said it to me. She said in the book, we need to learn to compete on a series of short-term transient advantages. And it just struck me as you and I are talking about this, like how much that to me is this massive shift. How do you get, your value is changing, your competitor value is changing, customer needs are shifting, whether it's
Yes.
supply chain stuff or geopolitical crap, everything's moving around, and these conversations are not annual. This is quarterly. The VP of sales told me we're doing the equivalent of annual planning quarterly right now. And everybody knows, like, annual planning, everybody shuts down, right, to do next year's plan. And so yeah, I just wonder about this notion. It's like, how do we get a shift or react to a shift to monetize something as quickly as possible, because we have a short window now. I just wonder how you think that might impact. Is marketing paying enough attention to that?
I'll give you an example of a client I worked with who had a 9-week long campaign cycle. Just from, we're going to start it to finish it, getting out and closing it. And in a place I've worked before, it was like 9 weeks as well. I got it down to 9 days.
Hmm.
Now, and I, as I mentioned, I had that feedback loop, and now we have a lot more feedback, right? So
Yeah.
if you cannot shift your campaign strategy, methods, formats, everything in 9 days or less, then you can't really be competitive right now.
Yeah.
And one of the clients, we were getting information. I mean, I could tell them offers that were running better today. But
Yes.
and we were monitoring social media at such a rapid rate, and I could tell you what was shifting to tomorrow. I could tell you the language to use. I could tell you the pictures, everything, graphics to use. They couldn't cycle with the information, Brian.
Yeah.
Could not. I could give them that insight, but they could not produce and cycle. And some of it was just their internal, approval systems. Not just, I mean, the software might have been able to
Hmm.
do that, but they weren't able to do that. So it's a
Yeah.
people and a system thing, right? The
Yep.
systems now can move very quickly. we have to be able to consume that and, turn it very quickly. I would, one of the things I would look at all the time is, you start shifting around to different channels and different methods. So maybe it's
Mhm.
LinkedIn now, maybe, oh, now people are paying more to mail. So let's do some mail. The minute something becomes standard, start looking for something different.
Right. Right.
Literally start. The minute something is like, oh, you always send this out at Tuesdays, or you always drop your TikTok on Saturday morning or whatever that is. As soon as someone tells you to do that, it's probably time to change it.
Correct. Well, the other thing back the I agree. It's so fast, and I had a discussion with an SVP at a Fortune 50 supply chain management company who bought a one of their biggest competitors in Europe, which then gave them a better global footprint to compete with the number two player in the industry. And in this industry, there's only three players. And I asked him, "You just made this acquisition. How long before words are coming out of salespeople's mouths to monetize this acquisition?" You know what he said to me? 6 to 9
Uh-oh.
months, best case. That I mean, think about that. It's like how we have a new competitive footprint now. We have new kind of customers we should be talking to. All this stuff because we do have this 6 to 9 months. He said, and he used marketing. By the time we get this stuff from marketing, and then whether or not sales uses it or whatever, that's pathetic.
See, I think one of the most attractive parts for sales, particularly in AI, is how fast we can
Yes.
onboard somebody now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I.
Is
I.
I mean,
Yep.
and to get them also not knowledgeable, but the sort of AI that gets them adept at it,
Well, it's
right? So,
funny. It's funny you say that, and I rarely talk about my business on this podcast. But we found that out too. We built something using AI, and it's an enterprise sales tool. And several folks have reacted recently that, oh my gosh, this is a great sales onboarding tool because it's really the best practices of your best people at every stage of the sales cycle from qualify to
right.
close. And I didn't even think of it that way. Like I just ran through GPT and repositioned some of our marketing to say this really is like those who have gone before you. This is what's in those sage brains, and let me drop
That's
it at each sales stage for you.
that's the best. I mean, to me, that's the best AI accelerant in sales. It truly
Yeah.
is. I mean,
Yep.
because with AI, we can say, okay, I want you to act like a telco CIO for B2B telecommunications infrastructure, and then I try out everything. I get my script right with you. I play with some scenarios and have it just. I mean, it can mimic your customer, so you can hone your skills and your presentations. It can kind of be your customer when it I mean, you can get a standard presentation and I can run it through my client persona builder, right?
Yeah.
And have it
Yeah.
completely tuned. And then as I have more interactions with that person, I load all those interactions and stuff in as a doc repository, and it really can start becoming my client. And I just
Yeah.
can get so good at even the client level sales activities.
It's you make me wonder if what do you think the adoption of AI is generally in corporate marketing, and not even a percent, but like how effective are the you just that it's massive, right? That in terms
Yeah.
of this sales and marketing disconnect we talked about, that could be the bridge used properly. But I wonder what your gut or actual knowledge is about how well it's being leveraged.
I look, I work in an AI company, and ours isn't still 100%. It's high, but I think for most companies it's a little bit of a struggle. And my
Yeah.
opinion of this. I know people are very worried about, am I going to be replaced with AI? And I'm like, no, you're going to be replaced by someone who knows how to use AI
Bingo.
well.
Bingo.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
it's
So,
like
and
the
I think marketing uses a lot for creative. I think they're going to have to get better at using it for the other parts, intelligence, their own interactions in the company.
yeah.
That I think those are going to be some things that they're going to have to get better at. Everybody's really attracted to using it for the creative. But I mean, some of the best things one of the very best things I use it for is figuring out the requirements from the
Yep.
content I have. I know that's not exciting, but my goodness, it's good at it and it saves me weeks.
Yeah. Yeah,
weeks.
without a doubt, we just interviewed a sales lead about everything he wanted his team to be doing, and then turned put that video into AI and turned it into prompts for the reps to multiply the sales leader over 300 or 400 people, and you
I
just
love it.
you just made me think of that. But you made a point. You and I almost did this podcast on AI, and but I'm really glad you brought up this point about it's not going to replace you. You're going to be replaced by people who are using it better and leveraging it more smartly. And it's funny because I think it was the Screenwriters Guild that was, the union was trying to sort of say you can't use AI to write screenplays, which by the way is never going to happen. That's that example of I'm not going to get rid of my horse. No way I'm ever getting a car. And it's figuring out how to work within it. And they interviewed one screenwriter who said, "Look, I used to be able. I'm going to screw up the numbers, but it's a directionally accurate story, like most of my stories." And he said, "I could do one screenplay in a year, right? If I use AI, I can do five." And I'm going to have it do the basic grunt work. I'm going to give it the ideas. And then I'm going to human buff this thing out, which only a human can do. And to me, that's kind of what you were saying. Like this, I think, is the approach to AI, whether you're a marketer or a seller or anybody else. It's like, how do you use it better than everybody else to do more?
One thing about using it a lot is I start becoming very aware of the things that I do that AI can't do.
Yeah.
Right. And like, why do I want to, work to figure out how to take a presentation and turn it into from one industry to another industry? But what I can do is that the AI can't do, which is to form a human connection and a trusting relationship with
Yeah.
somebody. The AI is just doing the stuff that, I'm not going to say it doesn't count, but it's not the most important pieces and it's
Yeah.
not the most human pieces, right? It's, I mean, to me, and that's what I start focusing on more and more is that the part of that human connection that I can do. Let AI free me up to spend more time with you, Brian.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Like AI can't have the conversation we just had. It
Yes.
can't.
It's I have to tell you, and for those of you who are listening, this is a slight aside, but hopefully you'll find it amusing. I was on with Kaz, my CTO, this morning, and he's now using AI to code stuff, to build stuff, right? And he's an old school coder, and he's learned how to master this. But he was showing me today, the AI came back and said, "Yeah, I have this thing done," and he went back to it and said, "But it doesn't look like it's working," and this blew me away. He said, the AI said, "Well, okay, sorry." I kind of lied to you, but I was trying to appear competent. So, and this isn't my AI, this is an outside service he's using, but I was trying to appear competent. And then, but Kaz was saying to me, he's like, I don't know if it was lying about lying because it may have actually done the work, but now it's hallucinating. He's like, one way or the other, it's lying to me. And my head almost exploded because it came back like a kid getting caught doing something wrong, saying, okay, I lied to you. I've never seen that. That's the first time I've seen this, but
I
that's an
have so
aside.
I have a guy that works for me that he really does agents that work with each other. And one of the things he does for research is he has an agent that like its job is to ride herd and fact check and double check what the
Yeah.
main agent is doing, pulling research forward. And so he'll cluster agents like that so that they kind of keep each other honest, so to speak,
Yeah.
and
No,
on
it's
topic.
it's ridiculous. And if you haven't heard this, excuse me, a gentleman and I did a podcast here a couple weeks ago about how to use AI for human coaching, right? And you can call it talk therapy, you can call it whatever you want, but it's so emotionally intelligent. Or he argued that it's not emotionally intelligent, but it's programmed to be so. So that there are so many uses. So let's do this before we close this out. I'm if I'm a sales or revenue leader, which I think most people who are here listening to this, what are the three things I should be doing right now to leverage marketing to drive more revenue for me?
Yeah, well, this was a lot about alignment, and like I said, it really bothers me that we're like everything is like crunched down to that lead conversion point, and maybe
Yeah.
some strategic planning once a year if you're lucky, it's quarterly, right? we have to have more touch points between sales and marketing. We do it. We have to have sales more aware and involved in marketing, and marketing more aware and involved in sales, because a lot of times we're able to do personalized one-to-one marketing. It's strange that that's not more adopted too. And I think some of that is, I feel like a salesperson would really be the one to drive AI to do better one-to-one
Yeah.
marketing.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, and I think there's value on both sides, but marketing and sales have to work together more on just that day to day, on more than that, just that place where you hand a lead over and they say yes or no. That's not it. You can't be aligned if that's the only place you touch during the
Yep.
day. Right. And then you have to have the visibility, Brian. I mean, I can't do my job as a marketer if I can't see all the way through.
Yeah.
Like, follow that lead, staple yourself to that lead and follow it all the way through and understand what happens to it. Right. Otherwise, again, and people can get, you can start thinking about a lot of KPIs, but if, look, my TikTok results have to still lead to revenue. Do I want playtime and all that stuff? Sure. When it's not producing the revenue it's supposed to produce. The first job is visibility through to what everything I do produces in terms of revenue. And then again, simplify those measures. Like I said, that TikTok example, my first measure of any channel, any method, any format has to be on whether it's going to influence the revenue number.
Yeah.
The rest of those metrics are like, if TikTok's producing what it's supposed to be producing and touching the people, and that's producing revenue, I'm not going to sweat those little measures. I dig into those when it's not producing for me. But that's not the first line of measurement I need to look at. It's always revenue. Sorry, it just is.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny too, because I learned this over the years when I had a real job in a big company, that some of the best consultants that came in were bringing like this street level stuff that I was sort of like, are you kidding? Like, we're paying, but it was all right on. It was street level and it was actionable stuff. And I found those to be the best consultants. And I learned from you today, because this, like, walk a mile in the other person's shoes thing, I mean, really do it for sales and marketing to understand this whole journey and how it all works. Like, that struck me. If I was sitting in a chief sales or revenue officer position right now, I'd make that happen somehow.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
What is it? What is it? What is this? What are the behaviors a sales guy exhibits when, they're not doing well, they're not hitting their number, but they're trying to keep you from digging too much, and you've only got 2x pipeline. What are the behaviors you see that salesperson do when they're trying to avoid that conversation, if you would?
With their
About their
boss.
number.
Oh,
Yeah.
about their number. Yeah. I mean, I suppose it depends on the human. I interviewed Walt Zola, who's the chief sales officer for Newman's Own. And Walt said, as a CSO, that he delivers bad news really fast. And I loved that. Right. That was a whole part of the podcast we talked about. And then the respect he gets from people, right? Because they trust him. So I think what a salesperson should do is deliver bad news fast. And my guess is what might happen, depending on the other kind of salesperson, is a lot of obfuscation and smoke.
I had all these meetings.
Yes.
I have these meetings set up. I have these meetings. I've been doing this presentation. It's all the activities and things they're doing.
Yeah. Yep. That's the obfuscation and the smoke. Yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier about, this activity-based versus revenue, based marketing. I'd come into places and I mean, oh my God, these marketers are working 14-hour days doing things, and not doing anything to move the number. And it's an obfuscation. It's like, look at all the stuff I'm doing. I'm like, but we still don't have the number. And earlier I said, I feel like technology, there's like, look, I bought a new software that's going to help us with the website. I bought a new software to help us with product launch. And it comes with all these KPIs and reports, but it's obfuscation. because you're still not hitting the revenue number.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think part of that's driven too by the way some managers coach. It's not really coaching, it's auditing. And so they got to make up some crap. The rep makes up crap to fill in those blanks. And
Yeah.
I've talked to some reps on this program who say the best coaching is when the coach is like, oh, that there's a blank in that. Let me help you fill in that blank, whatever that thing is you need, versus going, Tonya, you got to go do more of those. Let me go run some internal interference and get that deal approved for you. Or let me go do this, And I think so. Some of that behavior, the other thing you make me think of too is I've become, as an American, I was a big stock car racing fan, right? I grew up around stock cars, and I've become a huge fan of F1 racing. And one of the things, and I find it very motivational in business and in selling to watch all this, the F1, especially the Netflix series. But they do what you continue to do here. Nothing else matters unless you're on the podium. That's all that matters is winning races. And you keep doing that with revenue. It's like nothing
Yeah.
else matters. And yeah, you got to do that stuff. But that's the ultimate result is being on the podium, isn't it?
Right. Just all
Yep.
that matters. And one of the things after I've done this at various places, I scare the bejeebus out of marketers. I do, because, and this is the saddest thing, going back to that COO that said, oh, great, another piece of overhead. I have a lot, I'm afraid that most marketers out there do think they're overhead.
Yeah.
And when I tell them they're going to be revenue measured, it scares them. But once it's done and they realize that they're operating off a science, math, and ledger based approach, they're more confident, they're more relaxed, and they work a lot less.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
But it's sad to me that marketers don't believe that they actually have a revenue impact.
Yeah, no, I love that. And if they leaned into it, which is what you did, this is why I asked you that question about that snarky comment, because you used it to fuel everything we're talking about today. Yeah, you've been. I learned some stuff from you today, and I love that. I love doing this podcast because I tend to talk to, and I say this offline, nice people who are smart people. And you are, man, you're so in that category, and you've been super generous with your time, with your ideas, and I love having just this body of knowledge for our peers to say, hey, if you're sitting in a job somewhere and you're struggling with sales and marketing disconnect, listen to Tonya and see if you can get something.
And if I can help a CSO talk to the CMO and fix some of these things, if that's what this helps do, I think that's great. It could, it preserves both of them.
Yep. That is my number one goal with this is to have it be a body of knowledge for professionals to go to and go, hey man, what are my peers talking about? So you've added greatly to that today. And again, I really, really appreciate your time. And yeah, maybe next time we will have the AI discussion.
All right. Thanks, Brian. This is great.